The rumble of motorcycles tore through the parking lot, rattling the diner windows and turning heads. 4 bikes, 4 men. They weren't the kind of bikers people admired. These weren't hardened road warriors or old-school outlaws with a code. Number. These were the kind of men who fed off fear, who found their fun in other people's misery. And tonight, they had found their target. A man sat alone on a weathered bench at the far end of the lot, hunched over, his fingers wrapped around a small paper cup of gas station coffee. His clothes were faded and torn, his boots scuffed from years of wear. An old military duffel bag sat at his feet, its canvas covered in patches and stains, the kind that carried stories no one ever asked about. He had a weathered look, the kind of face that had seen too much of life, the kind most people looked right through. But Jack Callahan was used to that. In fact, he preferred it. The 4 men parked their bikes near the diner entrance, boots crunching against the pavement as they dismounted. They weren't in a hurry, stretching out the moment, soaking in the attention. Gage, the leader, took the first step toward Jack. Lean, mean, full of bad decisions. His leather jacket was ripped at the sleeves, the knuckles on his hands scarred from too many fights he barely won. Behind him, Travis, Boone, and Colt followed, all carrying that same predatory grin. Jack could feel their eyes on him, sizing him up. Calculating? It didn't take a genius to figure out what they saw. A homeless guy, alone, weak, a man who wouldn't fight back. They thought they had just found easy prey. Jack took another sip of his coffee, keeping his head down. He knew how this game worked. Let them come to you. Let them dig their own grave. "Hey, old man," Gage called out, taking slow, deliberate steps toward the bench. Jack didn't look up. That was the first thing that set Gage off. Men like him, they hated being ignored. "Hey!" Gage barked, louder this time. Jack exhaled slowly, then lifted his gaze. His eyes met Gage's. For the first time, the biker felt something he hadn't expected. Jack's stare wasn't blank or fearful. It was calm, too calm, like he wasn't seeing Gage at all, like he was seeing past him. The back of Gage's neck prickled, but he shoved that feeling down. "You look like you could use a couple bucks," Gage sneered, pulling a crumpled bill from his pocket. "Maybe enough for a hot meal, huh?" Boone and Travis chuckled. Jack just stared, no reaction. Gage's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. "Come on, man," Travis grinned, stepping forward. "What's the matter? Too proud?" Jack sighed, shaking his head. Not in frustration, more like disappointment. "Maybe he's deaf," Boone joked. "Maybe he don't understand English." Colt, the youngest of the group, was itching to prove himself. So he reached down, grabbed Jack's old military jacket, and tossed it onto the ground. "Bet this thing hasn't been washed since Vietnam," he laughed. Jack froze, just for a split second. Then, slowly, deliberately, he set his coffee down on the bench beside him, and when he spoke, his voice was low, even, and cold as steel. "Pick it up." The laughter stopped. Colt's grin wavered. "What?" Jack stood, smooth, effortless, controlled. Not the way an old man moved, the way a trained killer moved. "Pick it up," Jack repeated. Colt hesitated, and that's when it hit them. This guy wasn't afraid of them. He wasn't backing down. And for the first time, Gage felt that uneasy knot in his stomach tighten. Jack tilted his head slightly, his sharp blue eyes locking onto Colt's. "You boys ever hear of Marine Force Recon?" he asked casually. Silence. Boone blinked. "Wait, what?" Jack took a slow step forward. "You ever hear of a man hitting a target from over a mile away?" The air grew thick, tension coiled tight. Jack's voice was calm, matter of fact, like he wasn't telling them a story, like he was reliving a memory. "You ever hear what happens when a man trained to kill gets his hands on someone who deserves it?" Colt swallowed hard. Now they knew. Now it was too late. Jack lifted his hand in an old habit, his fingers adjusting as if he was holding a rifle. Gage took a full step back. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was instinct. Predator recognizing predator. Travis shifted uncomfortably. We didn't mean nothing by it, man." Jack didn't blink. "You don't joke with a man who's still got a perfect kill count." The lesson in fear. Colt scrambled to pick up the jacket, brushing it off like he was handling a holy relic. His hands shook. Jack took it from him without a word. Gage forced a weak chuckle, trying to mask the fear that was clawing at his throat. "Didn't mean no disrespect," he muttered. Jack said nothing. He just stood there, watching them, waiting. Until finally, they broke. One by one, the bikers backed away. Then they turned. Then they walked, fast but controlled, not running, because running would have admitted what they already knew, that they had just escaped something they weren't ready for. Jack slowly sat back down, pulling his jacket over his shoulders. He picked up his coffee, took a slow sip, and exhaled. He'd been in a lot of fights, some that left scars, some that left bodies. But this wasn't a fight. It was a lesson. And those boys, they would never forget it. Because they weren't the first men to underestimate him. And they sure as hell wouldn't be the last. The night air was thick with tension. The laughter, gone. The cocky smirks, erased. The four bikers stood frozen, their world suddenly smaller, their bravado stripped away like bark from a tree in a storm. Jack Callahan didn't threaten, didn't boast. He just existed in a way that told them everything they needed to know. They weren't looking at some washed-up homeless man anymore. They were looking at a predator who had spent years hunting men far worse than them. And they were nothing. Colt's hands shook as he held Jack's jacket out like a peace offering. Jack took it, slow and deliberate, never breaking eye contact. The fabric was old, torn in places, faded by years of sun and dirt. The patch on the sleeve, the 3rd Marine Recon insignia, had seen more war than all 4 of these punks combined. Jack dusted it off casually, like he wasn't even mad, like he had already won. And that was the worst part for them, because men like him never needed to say it out loud. "Didn't mean no disrespect," Gage muttered, clearing his throat. Jack tilted his head slightly. "You sure?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't mocking. It was just calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that belonged to men who had spent years in war zones, watching the life drain out of people who had made the same kind of stupid mistakes. Travis shifted uncomfortably. Boone rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact. Gage forced a chuckle, but it was hollow, weak. "Nah, man, just screwing around," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Jack nodded slowly. "You ever screw around with the wrong person before?" Silence. Then, "No?" Jack took a single step forward. The 3 bikers instinctively stepped back. Only Gage stood his ground, but his breath hitched. That's when it hit them. They weren't choosing to back away. They were reacting, like a deer catching a whiff of a wolf in the woods. Jack gave them one last look. "You boys ever get that feeling in your gut?" he asked. Nobody answered. "That feeling that tells you just made the worst mistake of your life?" Colt nodded. Jack exhaled. "Good. Next time, listen to it."